It all started when the HOA held one of their emergency neighborhood meetings, which, as usual, meant Karen had a new problem with our existence. My wife and I had just moved into this suburban HOA infested mess 2 months ago. We kept to ourselves, paid dues on time, even trimmed our hedges like we were applying for sainthood. But that wasn't enough for Karen, the self declared head of security, who patrolled the neighborhood with a walkie talkie and a superiority complex bigger than her 2 story colonial. The issue? Apparently, my wife had the audacity to park too close to the curb in front of our own house. A simple warning? Nope. Karen summoned the HOA police. Yes, they have those, who rolled up like they were busting a meth lab. 2 rent-a-cop wannabes with sunglasses and attitudes strutted out of their golf cart like they were in an action movie. One had a neck tattoo of an eagle. The other kept patting his hip like he wanted everyone to know he was authorized to carry. They demanded to see my wife's license, registration, HOA compliance card, basically anything that made them feel important. My wife stood there, arms crossed, silently evaluating them like a predator studying its prey. Ma'am, Tattoo Cop barked, failure to comply with HOA Ordinance 47B could result in fines or detainment. My wife raised an eyebrow. Detainment? She said calmly. That's funny. You know that's illegal, right? That set them off. Eagle Tattoo pulled out a citation pad while the other one, a chihuahua with a badge, reached for his holster. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, he warned, puffing out his chest like a dollar store action figure. Now let me give you some context. My wife doesn't rattle easily. Not during arguments, not during turbulence, not even when our stove caught fire because I thought baking soda and flour were interchangeable. She's calm, calculating, and terrifyingly composed. She smiled and said, I suggest you rethink your next move. Karen was watching from her porch, arms crossed, a smirk on her crusty lips like she was watching her favorite soap opera. Told you she was trouble, Karen yelled. She looked suspicious the day she moved in. That's when things escalated faster than a toddler on sugar. The cop actually unholstered his gun and pointed it directly at my wife. On the ground, now, he shouted. That was the moment my blood turned to ice. I stepped forward, yelling, What the hell are you doing? But before I could blink, my wife moved. So fast it looked like a glitch in the Matrix. In one fluid motion, she snatched the cop's wrist, disarmed him, ejected the magazine, and slammed the slide to the ground. His gun was now just a collection of metal on the pavement. The second cop reached for his taser, but she spun and kicked it right out of his hand before he could blink. Both of them stood frozen, mouths wide open like cartoon characters who just saw a ghost. Karen screamed, She assaulted an officer! Arrest her! My wife turned toward her, cold as steel. I'm a federal asset. That weapon pointed at me just made this a federal crime. Karen's face dropped like she'd been slapped by karma. You could have heard a mosquito fart in that silence. HOA patrol backed up like scared puppies. I just stood there stunned, trying to process how my sweet wife just disassembled a gun like she was changing batteries in a remote. The HOA police did what most cowards do when their bluff gets called. They stumbled backward, muttering something about miscommunication and protocol review, like those words would glue their dignity back together. Karen, however, wasn't done. No, Karen doubled down like she was the queen of bad decisions. This is assault, she shrieked, pointing at my wife as if she expected a SWAT team to helicopter in and save her. My wife, unfazed, picked up the dismantled pieces of the gun and handed them to the stammering officer like she was returning borrowed scissors. You're lucky I didn't report this directly to Quantico, she said flatly. Officer Neck Tattoo opened and closed his mouth like a goldfish, then grabbed his partner by the elbow. Let's file a report back at HQ, he mumbled. HQ being a glorified HOA shed next to the pool, stocked with Gatorade and garden tools. They scrambled away like roaches in the light, leaving Karen alone in the driveway, shaking with rage and humiliation. This isn't over, she yelled, wagging a finger that probably hadn't bent since the Reagan administration. You people think you're above the rules. My wife stared at her, calm as ever. No, we're just not afraid of fake cops with real stupidity. Karen stormed off, flustered and muttering something about calling the board. Classic move. When all else fails, call the committee of overcooked boomers who enforce arbitrary rules about mailbox paint and grass height. That evening, we received a formal letter. printed on HOA letterhead, which is just Times New Roman on beige cardstock, that read like a high school essay titled, How to Be Petty. It claimed my wife was now under internal neighborhood investigation for endangering community security, violating the Peaceful Neighbor Act, and, you'll love this, exhibiting signs of trained aggression. It sounded like they were accusing her of being a rabid dog. My wife read the letter, blinked once, and said, "They want to play games." I'd seen that look before. It was the same look she had when we got stuck in Guatemala, and she talked our way past a military checkpoint by quoting obscure international treaties. The next day, Karen was out again, armed with a clipboard and a thirst for vengeance. She brought backup this time, 3 other HOA henchmen who looked like retired substitute teachers on a power trip. They marched up to our porch like it was Normandy. I opened the door to a wall of khakis, tucked-in polos, and pure entitlement. "We're here to conduct a compliance review," Karen sniffed. "Your wife is not to be present during this evaluation." I nearly laughed. "She lives here," I said. "You don't get to ban residents from their own property." Karen's eyes narrowed like she smelled rebellion. "Then this will be documented as a refusal to cooperate." That's when my wife stepped into view. Quiet, poised, wearing a casual black t-shirt that said, "I do my own stunts." She held her phone up. "Smile. You're now being recorded," she said. Karen immediately started waving her hands. "You can't record without permission." My wife didn't blink. "I'm collecting evidence for federal review. I suggest you all leave before this becomes obstruction." The henchmen suddenly looked a lot less enthusiastic about this compliance review. One of them, an older man who smelled like mothballs and despair, whispered, "Maybe we should come back later." But Karen wasn't backing down. "We're calling the sheriff," she snapped. "You're a threat to this neighborhood." My wife smiled. A slow, dangerous smile. "Good. I've been meaning to talk to someone with actual authority." Karen must have thought she summoned the Avengers when she called the sheriff's department, because she stood in our driveway like she was the queen of suburbia waiting to be knighted. We watched from the living room window as she practiced her victim face in her reflection, tilting her head just right to look innocent, even though her eyes screamed delusion and Diet Coke addiction. When the patrol car finally rolled up, she waved her arms like she was landing a plane. The poor deputy stepped out, looking confused and instantly exhausted. Karen lunged into her Karen monologue, complete with wild hand gestures, exaggerated fear, and the phrase, "I feared for my life," tossed in like seasoning. "She's military trained or something," she shouted. "She disarmed a firearm. That's not normal civilian behavior. She could be part of a militia." The deputy raised an eyebrow. "You called us because someone's too calm?" Karen nodded like she just cracked a conspiracy theory. "Yes, that, and she threatened me with federal prosecution." He sighed, glanced over at our house, and said, "Did she touch you?" "No, but her presence was threatening." The deputy stared at her like she'd grown a second head. "Ma'am, being intimidating isn't illegal. Otherwise, my mother-in-law would be serving life." I choked on my coffee when I heard that through the window, but Karen didn't laugh. "Oh no." She doubled down like it was poker night and she was all in with a losing hand. "You don't understand," she hissed. She's hiding something." The deputy politely told her to relax and approached our door. I opened it with a calm smile and said, "Officer, please come in." My wife stood in the kitchen. Sipping tea like this was just another Tuesday. "Afternoon," she said coolly. "Can I help you?" The deputy cleared his throat. "I apologize, ma'am. I was called here because your HOA president believes you're some kind of threat to the community." My wife didn't even flinch. "Would it help if I showed you my credentials?" That got his attention. She walked to the safe, entered a code, and pulled out a sleek black wallet. She opened it, revealing a CIA identification card so official it could have made Karen's eyebrows burst into flames. The deputy blinked. "Is this real?" "You want to scan the QR code?" she offered. Now, I've never seen a sheriff turn pale that fast without a crime scene, but this guy took a full step back. I'm very sorry, Agent." "You can call me Mrs. Maxwell," she said. "We prefer discretion." He nodded quickly and whispered, "Got it. I'll go smooth things over with the HOA." He left with his head down like a high schooler who forgot his homework. Karen was still pacing like a lunatic on our lawn. He walked over and leaned in. "You might want to let this go, ma'am." "What?" Why? Because your neighbor's probably higher clearance than the governor. Karen didn't believe him. Of course not. She marched to the HOA office like she was preparing to impeach us from the neighborhood. Later that night, we got an email. Subject line, urgent, board hearing scheduled. Apparently, Karen convinced the other board members to summon us for a private disciplinary meeting to determine our eligibility for continued residence. She even cited covert affiliations with hostile agencies. My wife looked up from her laptop and grinned. If they want a hearing, I'll give them one. Let's see how far they're willing to go before they choke on red tape. The HOA disciplinary hearing was held in what they proudly called the Community Conference Center, but was really just an over-decorated shed with folding chairs, stale donuts, and enough passive-aggressive energy to power a small city. Karen sat at the front, wearing a beige pantsuit and a smug expression like she was presiding over a war tribunal. The rest of the board looked like they'd been dragged there against their will. Most of them were probably just hoping for free snacks. My wife walked in wearing a blazer sharp enough to cut steel, heels that clicked like a countdown, and a look that said, "Try me and die tired." I walked behind her, mostly for moral support, and to witness whatever carnage was about to unfold. Karen immediately banged a plastic gavel she probably got from Amazon. "This hearing will come to order," she announced, like anyone asked her. "We are here to determine whether this household is in violation of HOA Code 12.1, threatening community stability." The board members looked around like they had no idea what that code was. My wife calmly took a seat, crossed her legs and pulled out a manila folder that made Karen visibly twitch. "Before we begin," my wife said smoothly, "I've brought documentation. I'd like this entered into your records." She handed out sealed envelopes to each board member like subpoenas. Karen didn't get one. "What is this?" one board member asked. "A legal analysis of your charter," my wife said. "You're violating federal discrimination laws. Also, I submitted a FOIA request and found that this HOA has misused neighborhood funds for personal purchases, including, but not limited to, a hot tub and 84 boxes of scented candles." Dead silence. One board member coughed. Karen sputtered. That's completely irrelevant," she barked. "This hearing is about her, not me." My wife leaned forward, eyes glinting. "Actually, it's about the fact that someone in this room authorized HOA security to draw a weapon on a federal agent. That's not a rule violation. That's a felony." Karen turned the color of unbuttered toast. "You're bluffing," she snapped. "You don't scare me." My wife stood up slowly. "You should be scared of what comes next if I decide to press charges." Then she slid a flash drive across the table. "Every interaction with your board has been documented. I've sent this footage to an internal oversight department. And FYI, 2 of your patrol members are now under review for impersonating law enforcement." That was the moment Karen cracked. "You're a threat," she shouted, standing so fast her chair flipped. "You don't belong here. You and your freak husband think you're better than everyone else." A board member to her left sighed. "Karen, sit down." "No," she shrieked. "She's dangerous. She thinks she can ruin me." My wife raised an eyebrow. "I don't think I can. I know I can." Karen lunged forward like she was going to snatch the flash drive, but my wife calmly reached into her purse and placed a small black device on the table. It beeped once. "This is a tracker," she said quietly. "If anything happens to me, my agency knows exactly where to find every one of you." The room went silent. A board member leaned forward, whispering, "Wait, agency?" Another muttered, "I thought she was bluffing." Karen sat down slowly like the air had just left her body. She didn't say another word. When we walked out of that building, you could feel the shift in power. The HOA had poked a bear, and that bear filed paperwork. My wife turned to me and whispered, "Now let's see how long they keep pretending they're in control." You'd think after the hearing debacle, Karen and her HOA lackeys would take the L, crawl into a decorative shrub, and reevaluate their life choices. But no, entitlement is a drug, and Karen was overdosing. 3 days later, we got a notice taped to our door. Not mailed, not emailed, taped, like we were being evicted from a college dorm. The letter claimed that due to escalating tensions and ongoing federal interference, our household posed a security risk and would be fined $5,000 a day until we vacated. I read it out loud while eating cereal and nearly choked on my spoon. My wife just smirked. Perfect, she said. They just signed their own death warrant. She made 3 phone calls. That's it. 3. By the end of the week, Karen's world was crumbling faster than her spray tan in the rain. The first call was to her agency's legal team. The second, an audit department buried so deep in government infrastructure, you'd need a submarine and a blood sacrifice to find it. The third, classified. All I know is a convoy of black SUVs showed up the following Tuesday, parked neatly in front of the HOA building, and sat there with tinted windows and engines running. They didn't get out. They didn't knock. They just existed, ominously. Karen called an emergency HOA meeting that evening. Only 4 people showed up. 2 of them brought snacks. 1 brought a resignation letter. By morning, the entire HOA board had mysteriously stepped down, citing personal health concerns and a desire to spend more time with family. Karen, of course, clung to power like a barnacle with control issues. She went on the neighborhood forum and wrote a 1,200-word essay about deep state harassment and militant liberal infiltrators. My wife printed it out and added it to a file she titled Karen's Greatest Hits. But then came the best part. The sweet, delicious, caramel-coated revenge. A formal investigation was opened against the HOA. Turns out they weren't just abusing authority, they were laundering money through fake improvement projects. Community Flower Fund, my butt. That so-called landscaping budget was funding Karen's weekly spa visits and her weird obsession with hand-carved flamingo statues. The IRS got involved, the FBI peeked in, the neighborhood Facebook group exploded with popcorn emojis. Karen tried to flee responsibility by filing a restraining order against us, claiming constant intimidation by tactical gestures. The judge tossed it out in under 3 minutes. "Ma'am," he said, "you're not being stalked. You're just experiencing consequences." The final nail in the coffin? My wife didn't just stop at exposing them. She bought them. Through a friend of a friend government auction loophole, she legally acquired the land the HOA was built on. Every inch of their little kingdom, gone. That's right. She bought the HOA headquarters, the shed, the parking spots, even Karen's precious community bulletin board. Overnight, the whole HOA was dissolved. We posted a new sign on the old HOA office. Under new management, no Karens allowed. The neighborhood held a barbecue in our yard to celebrate. Karen wasn't invited. She stood across the street watching it all burn down with a plate of microwave lasagna and rage. Now, the neighborhood runs itself just fine. No random fines, no patrol golf carts, no clipboards of doom. Just neighbors, peace, and 1 retired CIA agent who gardens like nothing happened. Every time we see Karen, she turns and walks the other way. And the best part? She still has to drive past the sign every morning that reminds her she picked a fight with the wrong woman and lost everything.